eventually in 1991, you and Lloyd had what you have called an amicable split. Why did you choose to go separate ways after such success?
I think that after the first two records that we made worked really well, and the third record that we made really wasn't working at country radio at all. And then we made a second attempt, which I thought was flawed, at adding 3 songs to that record and re-releasing it. And the politics of what was going on at RCA at the time were kind of driving me crazy. And Bill wanted to head in one direction musically, and I really wanted to head in a more traditional direction.
And he wanted to go more towards pop.
Right. And I was like, man, as much as I love pop music, and our management felt like they could have gotten us a pop label deal at the time, and or had us move to, RCA's pop division. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. And that's not really who I am. And so I felt like, look, we've had a really good run, and we've done what most people never get to do. And I think it's time we went separate ways, at least for a little while, and figure this out, and I kind of had to do some soul searching, and quite frankly, my marriage was in trouble at the time, too, and I felt like I needed to be home to try to figure that out, and so I just said, I'm not doing it, but Bill understood, he was really, really good about it, and as a matter of fact, he and I have been writing together this year for the first time in, Lord knows, years and years.
Wow.
I don't know what's going to become of it, but I know we've written 3 songs in the last year together. So.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions right before the end. Do you think that you and Bill would ever record another album together?
There's always a possibility. You never know. I mean, it might happen. I know we're gonna pile up a bunch of songs and see what we think they ought to do, and but it's certainly closer now than it ever has been, because we're actually sitting down and writing songs together.
Great.
So that's go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, so you and Lloyd split, and then you went looking for a solo recording deal, and you soon started talking with Arista president Tim DuBois, who had once managed Foster and Lloyd, right?
Tim DuBois, and he had once managed Foster and Lloyd, but he had left to the head of Arista Records, and of Arista's country division. And so when I, was looking for a label that might be interested, I went to go talk to him and said, I'm playing an acoustic show at the Bluebird Cafe. Why don't you come out? And he told me, he said, I love what you do, Radney. He said, but I'm looking for somebody who's more traditional than you are. And I said, well, don't say that till you've heard the music. And he said, fair enough. He said, when are you playing? And I told him, and he said, I'll be there. And so he came out, and he brought, and I didn't even know he was going to do this, but he had 2 guys sitting with him, and I didn't know that either one of them from Adam's House Cat, but, they were, one was the head of marketing, and the other was the head of radio promotions. And at the end of my set, I was at the Bluebird Cafe, and Tim cornered me, and he said, look, you're going to get a lot of offers. He said, I just want to be the first in line. And I said, well, I don't think there's anybody else I want to make records for if you already made the offer. So we shook on it, and that's how I ended up on Arista Records.
And he gave you a suggestion that you should sort of concentrate on songwriting before jumping back into recording. Is that true?
Well, actually, he just wanted me. He was really happy with about 6 or 7 songs, and he's like, just before we go in, I want you to write and spend another, 2 or 3 months, 4 months writing your tail off before we go in. And so in that respect, yes. He wasn't, so happy with it that he was like, you got all 10, man. You got all 12. Just go in right now. He just beat me up so badly about those last 3 that, and actually I ended up writing, probably 5 more that made the record, and so there were 5 sort of in place he had heard, that night at the Bluebird, that he was like, well, that's what got me the deal. But then there was,
yeah,
5 others that I wrote, that sort of made the record.
So, finally in 1992, you released the critically acclaimed album Del Rio, Texas, 1959, and that happens to be, I think, probably my favorite album of yours that you've recorded.
Oh, thanks very much. It's
You're
the
welcome.
most traditional record I think I've ever made. And although I think Labor of Love in some ways is just as traditional, it just,
Yeah.
for whatever reason, there's something about Del Rio, Texas that just was a little more, I don't know, it's a little more soulful, and it's a little more gritty, a little less slick.
It features several prominent Texas shuffle tunes in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it really does have an extremely traditional feel, and I think it's sort of reminiscent of Ray Price and Merle Haggard recordings from the 50s and the 60s.
Oh, man, thanks very much. Well, Ray was a really big influence in one sense because the guy who taught me anything and everything about swing music was Ray Price's piano player, and he lived in Del Rio, my hometown, and I would go sit in with their band, and he actually, taught me a lot of guitar, even though he wasn't a guitar player. He could pull out a Mel Bay chord encyclopedia and go take what he was playing on the piano and say, look, you got to play this thing there, and it needs to swing harder, and, that kind of thing.
And now I'll just take the second to throw in a plug for my show in December. Ray Price will be actually visiting with me here on the program, too.
Well, you tell him I said hello, because he's a dear old friend, and
I will.
And a hero to me. So.
And you said that this record is about learning how to two-step at the 4-H barns in Del Rio, and just remembering a time in your life which was really special, listening to the music of Waylon Jennings and Emmylou Harris, and I'm sure you intended that album to come out that way when you were writing the songs.
Oh, no question. I was really, I thought about those first 2 or 3 Emmylou Harris records that were so, it's funny because, they were being done by a rock band and played by a rock band in Los Angeles, when they were being recorded, and yet they were countryer than anything that was happening out of Nashville at the time, and it had a big influence on me. And certainly Waylon Jennings records, in particular that Honky Tonk Heroes record that is all
Fabulous.
Billy Joe Shaver songs.
Album.
It's a amazing record, and those had big influences on me.